Hello, I'm Jared Taylor with American Renaissance. A lot of people don't want anyone to watch my videos, so if you like what you see, I hope you'll send the link to a lot of your friends. Why do blacks behave the way they do? Why is it that whenever we read certain headlines, we can be almost certain that the story is about black people? For example, 4 dead, including child, after stimulus check dispute leads to gunfire. Or how about toddler died after being left alone for 6 days as mother celebrated 18th birthday. Or 2 schoolgirl carjackers aged 13 and 15 are pulled from overturned vehicle in D.C. and arrested for murder. And how about postal worker in Michigan brutally beaten by 2 women, video shows. And then there is the perennial 55 shot, 10 fatal in Chicago weekend gun violence. Even the most committed liberals must know these stories are going to be about blacks. And anyone whose eyes aren't shut tight knows that IQ has something to do with it. Even the very leftist Wikipedia recognizes that on intelligence tests there is a difference in average score between black people and white people of 1.1 standard deviations. In practical terms, that means only 16% of blacks have an IQ of 100 or higher. And it means that whites are 30 times more likely than blacks to have an IQ over 125. Back in 1994, the famous book, The Bell Curve, reported long-established findings on the correlation between low IQ and all kinds of behavior we don't want: crime, poverty, illegitimacy, shiftlessness, obesity, you name it. All these things are a lot more likely in people with low IQs than in smart people. But IQ isn't the whole story. If you compare blacks and whites with the same IQs, black behavior is still different. For example, look at these tables showing the likelihood of a 29-year-old woman ever having been on welfare. The top graph shows 13% of white women and 49% of black women. A black woman is 3.8 times more likely. But if you look at the second graph, only of women with IQs of 100, it's 12% of white women, but still 30% for black women. A black woman with a 100 IQ is still 2.5 times more likely than a white woman with the same IQ to have been on welfare. Look at the likelihood of having an illegitimate child. Without controlling for IQ, the figures are 12% for white women, 62% for black women. If you control for IQ, and the figures are still 10% and 51%. Black women are still 5 times more likely to have illegitimate babies. You get similar data for the likelihood that men will be in prison. If you don't control for IQ, black men are 6.5 times more likely than white men to be in jail. If you limit the sample to men with an IQ of 100, blacks are still 2.5 times more likely to be in jail. So, what's going on? The obligatory explanation is that systemic racism and white supremacy are making life miserable for black people. But there's a better explanation. And Professor Richard Lynn of the University of Ulster has done the most important work on this question. He's written a book showing that blacks across the board are more likely than whites to be psychopaths. There's a good summary of his findings in an article at amran.com called Race and Psychopathic Personality. The American Psychiatric Association defines psychopathic personality as including such things as breaking rules, failure to plan ahead, aggressiveness and frequent fighting, risk-taking, failure to honor financial obligations, being a bad parent, and the inability to be sexually faithful. Blacks are more psychopathic than whites on all counts. And, by the way, whites are more psychopathic than Asians. This turns up on personality tests. The MMPI, or Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, has been used since the 1930s. Blacks and American Indians get the highest scores on psychopathy, followed by Hispanics, then whites, then Asians. There are similar results on tests of what are called the Big Five personality traits: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Unusually low scores on agreeableness and conscientiousness are associated with psychopathic personality. This paper from 2014 finds that blacks are significantly lower than whites on those two important traits. As noted earlier, psychopaths have trouble planning ahead, and you can test whether people live in the present or think about the future. In the 1970s, Walter Mischel came up with the marshmallow test, in which he gave children a choice between one marshmallow now or two marshmallows at some point in the future. This and similar studies with older children find that people who can delay rewards, that is, those who think in terms of the future, get better grades, are less likely to smoke or take drugs, and are more successful in life. These results have been widely reported. Much less widely reported are the racial differences, with the usual pattern. Whites are more willing than blacks to wait for a greater reward, and Asians are more willing than whites. You get the same race differences when you control for IQ, because the ability to delay gratification is correlated with intelligence, but it's not the same thing as intelligence. That's probably why when whites and blacks get the same SAT scores, that is, when they have the same basic intelligence, whites get better grades in college. Whites are less likely to goof off, skip class, or wait until the last minute to study for exams. Risk-taking is part of psychopathic behavior. This paper finds that blacks are more likely than whites to take risks, and men are more likely than women. This 2015 article on race differences in patterns of risky behavior in adolescence is even more straightforward. It found some teenagers who are very high in different kinds of diverse risk-taking: drugs, running away, fighting, delinquency. As you can see on this page, we identified a similar group, i.e. high-risk, diverse behavior, among the black subgroup only. On the same page, the authors write, finally, a class of adolescents specializing in risky sexual behavior was unique among the black adolescents. These results underscore the importance of accounting for race when examining patterns of adolescent behavior. It is clear from our results that applying a one-shoe-fits-all approach to adolescent risk behavior limits our understanding of how these behaviors coalesce. Needless to say, you never read about this study in the New York Times. One of the best predictors of adult psychopathic personality is wild behavior as a child, and there are consistent race differences. There's probably not one school district in the country where students of different races are punished or disciplined at the same rate. Here is a typical headline. School suspension data shows glaring disparities in discipline by race. This reports that nationally, black students are suspended at 5 times the white rate. Supposedly racist white teachers always get the blame for this. But does anyone really believe that in this hypersensitive time, white teachers are systematically punishing black students unfairly? This article claims that if black students have black teachers, they are less likely to be punished. But the difference turns out to be only a few percentage points. Black teachers are still much more likely to punish black students than white students. The obvious reason is that black children behave badly. By the way, differences of this kind have been found in Britain, Canada, and in Europe as well. One of the most extreme forms of psychopathic behavior is murder, and we can learn a lot from this report from the Justice Department. Table 1 shows how much more likely blacks are than whites to commit murder. The rightmost figures in the last 3 lines tell the story. These are murder rates by race per 100,000 people. The white rate of 4.5 is 1/7 the black rate of 34.4. And the real difference is even greater because Hispanics, who have higher murder rates than whites, have been lumped in with the whites. Blacks probably commit murder at 8, 9, maybe even 10 times the white rate. And it's all very well to blame this on white supremacy. But how exactly do white people force or trick black people into killing each other, or into having illegitimate children, or going on welfare? Psychopathic behavior explains not just gruesome crimes in the United States, but also in Africa. Mass slaughter by machete, the barbaric torture murder of white farmers in South Africa, killing albinos to use their body parts in black magic, burning witches. All of these things show the heartless disregard for others that is typical of psychopaths. Well, why would blacks be more psychopathic? In his excellent book, Making Sense of Race, Edward Dutton argues that it's because of evolution. Whites and Asians evolved in harsh northern climates in which people had to make plans to make it through the winter. They had to cooperate to hunt and share food, and couples had to stay together for children to survive. Africa was more forgiving. Cooperation, planning ahead, and care for children were less important. Psychopaths could survive, reproduce, and pass along their genes. I think this is as good an explanation as any. The point is, however they got that way, people of different races are, on average, different. Expecting everyone to be the same is crazy. Blaming whites when blacks fall short is not just crazy, it's vicious. Until we understand this, we can't even begin to talk about America's problems, much less solve them. Thank you for watching. I hope you'll subscribe to this video channel. Also, I invite you to visit amren.com, amren.com. You'll find not just videos, but podcasts, articles, discussions, a lot of things that I'm sure will interest you. But again, thanks so much for watching.